Thank you. Our scripture lessons, you can find them, and I was a bit all over the board this week, admittedly so. You'll find them listed in the center column in the back of your worship bulletin. I decided after all of this to go with the chosen text for this Sunday lectionary reading. This is the last Sunday in the church season of Epiphany. Next week, the colors will go to purple. They've already changed out under the pavilion. Ash Wednesday, as I said, is Wednesday, and that marks the 40 days till Easter, in and through Passion Week. So we begin that journey, and the scripture that was selected in the lectionary is the story of Jesus' transfiguration. And Guillermo will read that in a minute, and I will give you just a little background. But if you look at these texts in the back, you may get a clue as to the many ideas that were bouncing around in my head this past week. Ecclesiastes, for everything there is a time and a season. Psalms, some trust in chariots and their war horses, but we trust in our God. And Jesus in Matthew, put your sword away, he tells his disciples. Put it back where it belongs, for those who live by the sword will die by the sword. But the lectionary text, the lectionary reading, comes to us. It is at the end of Jesus' Galilean ministry, just before he begins his journey, according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, of course, is where the heavies are. It is where the power lays at that time, at least formally, with the temple in the city, the Sadducees, and the seat of power held by the Romans. It isn't the only one, but it kind of was the center of authority and wealth and power at that time. Now, the story that will be read here tells us that Jesus took a close cadre of disciples, the inner circle, up to the top of a mountain where, as he is standing there, suddenly an apparition or a vision or something revealing Moses and Elijah appear on his right and the left. Now, Moses is the great lawgiver. The Ten Commandments, the whole thing, the first leader from slavery to freedom, and the establishment and the boundaries that form the people of Israel and Judah. And Elijah is the Hall of Fame prophet as well, who stands up to the idols of Baal and has the big showdown on the top of Mount Carmel. Now remember, this concludes the ministry as we move towards the Passion, and it really summarizes what Jesus said earlier. I have not come to abolish the law, Moses, the prophets, Elijah, but to fulfill them. One other thing takes place, that for the second time, the first being at his baptism, at the beginning of his ministry, the voice says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." It's a voice of affirmation. This is my child. Listen to him. And then, of course, the text says Moses and Elijah go away, and they are left with Jesus. And Peter wishes to build a tabernacle or shrine around this event to commemorate it and to preserve it. But that's not how the story ends. The story says that they go down the mountain. It's a steep mountain. And given the context, I am sure they faced south, which is towards Jerusalem, and began their journey towards the Passion Week and the events of that upcoming time. Guillermo will read the text now. He'll tell you the scripture if you wish to follow along in the Bibles that are in the pews.
From the Gospel of Luke. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep. But since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what is it that he was saying. And while Peter was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them. They were terrified as the cloud entered. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent. And in those days, they told no one anything of the things that they had seen. Here ends this reading, and we ask for God's blessings upon it.